Imagine dawn breaking over medieval Japan, revealing the silhouettes of mounted warriors assembling under a local lord's banner. This iconic image of the samurai, Japan's warrior class, evokes ideals of valor and honor. But the story of their rise isn't a single dramatic event, but rather a gradual evolution that historians are still struggling to fully comprehend. Over centuries, provincial fighters grew into a distinct class that would come to dominate Japan and become one of the most famous warrior classes in all of history. In the late 8th century, Japan's imperial court modeled its military on China's system of peasant conscripts. This approach proved impractical, partly because Japan lacked the massive imperial bureaucracy of the Chinese state. Farmers often evaded service without any consequences, and distant provinces were hard to control. By 792 AD, the court abolished universal conscription, effectively disbanding the national army. With no standing army, security fell to local landowners and officials, and this shift marked the genesis of a new warrior class. By the mid-9th century, noble families and great temples were hiring guards and forming private militias to protect their tax-free estates, known as shuan, from bandits and rival claimants. The court, facing rebellions on its frontiers, found it expedient to commission regional strongmen for help. Early military leaders were often descendants of emperors or noble clans sent out as provincial governors. Two families in particular, the Minamoto and the Taira, boasted imperial lineage but earned fame through force of arms. They and other clan chieftains built networks of fighting men bound to them by personal loyalty and reward. Initially, these provincial warriors were seen as upstarts by the refined courtiers of Kyoto. In the elegant capital, aristocrats wrote Chinese poetry and viewed themselves as the pinnacle of culture, while beyond the city, armed landowners dealt with the gritty realities of governing. The imperial court's reliance on these warriors meant that military service became entwined with estate management. Landholders would grant a portion of their estate to a trusted fighter in exchange for protection, creating a patron-vassal relationship. Over time, such arrangements became hereditary, and by the 10th century, the central government's influence in the provinces had significantly waned. Private estates spread across the land, each backed by its own band of warriors, and the authority of Kyoto over these far-flung domains grew increasingly tenuous. A striking early example of samurai assertiveness was the revolt of Taira no Masakado in 939 AD. A provincial magnate in the Kanto region, Masakado quarreled with local rivals and eventually declared himself the new emperor of the eastern provinces. He seized control of several territories, a shocking challenge to Kyoto's authority. The court put a bounty on his head, and within months, Masakado was hunted down and slain by other samurai loyal to the government. His rebellion, the first of its kind, demonstrated both the bold ambitions of regional warlords and the reality that only other warriors could stop them. Even in failure, Masakado's actions showed that the samurai were increasingly powerful and dared to openly defy the imperial order. In reality, as we will see, it may be that his mistake was simply that he declared himself emperor. Through the 10th and 11th centuries, the imperial court continued to lose grip on distant provinces. High officials in Kyoto became even more inwardly focused, with most attention being paid to courtly ceremonies and religious observances. These withdrawn aristocrats continued to accept their slide from a Chinese-style bureaucratic administrative government to a completely decentralized state only loosely held together. The great civilian aristocratic clans like the Fujiwara still held lofty titles, but they depended on warriors to actually keep the peace in the hinterlands. By the mid-12th century, samurai clans had become crucial players in the capital's affairs. The samurai as a class had become extremely powerful, but certain factions within the class wanted more direct and formalized recognition of their power. In 1156, a dispute over imperial succession, the Hogan Rebellion, saw Taira and Minamoto warriors backing rival claimants to the throne. By way of reminder, both the Taira and Minamoto clan were descendants of the imperial household, a fact which helped draw warriors to their respective banners. This is also one factor that led to them having support amongst factions of Kyoto aristocrats. The rebellion ended with victory for the faction led by Taira no Kiyomori, who emerged as the power broker in Kyoto. 3 years later, in 1159, Kiyomori thwarted a new plot against him in the Heiji Rebellion by the Minamoto clan. He executed his Minamoto rivals and exiled the defeated heir, a youth named Minamoto no Yoritomo, to a remote province. I may shock you here, but Kiyomori was born about 9 centuries before the premiere of Breaking Bad and didn't have an opportunity to watch the program. If he had, he may have taken Mike Ehrmantraut's words about the dangers of half measures to heart. This exiled Minamoto heir, who Kiyomori granted leniency after eliminating a large portion of his clan, would one day grow up into one of the most important people in Japanese history. For now, though, Kiyomori took a victory lap, and for the first time, a samurai warlord had become the undisputed master of the imperial government. Kiyomori reached the height of influence by marrying his daughter into the imperial family and installing his infant grandson as emperor. Although he never took the title of shogun, Kiyomori effectively controlled Japan, blending the roles of court noble and military leader. He maintained the facade of imperial rule, taking high ranks and governing in the emperor's name, but his ascent showed that warriors were willing to fully eclipse the civil nobility. Many courtiers resented this upstart's rule, yet significantly, Kiyomori still sought legitimacy from the existing order, even as he dominated it, indicating that the samurai's authority was still couched in service to the throne. In essence, he laid the foundation for a government where a member of the samurai class called the shots despite being officially nothing more than a mere servant of the emperor. Kiyomori's dominance would not go unchallenged. In 1180, simmering resentment against Taira rule ignited the Genpei War, which ran from 1180 to 1185. Minamoto no Yoritomo, now grown and determined to restore his clan's fortunes, raised a banner of rebellion in the eastern provinces. He rallied samurai who opposed the Taira, and civil war swept the country. After 5 years of fierce battles, fought from the plains around Kyoto to the far western sea, the Minamoto forces crushed the Taira. The conflict culminated in 1185 at the naval battle of Dan no Ura, where Kiyomori's clan was annihilated. The Taira clan, which just decades ago had been gleefully destroying the Minamoto, had now been completely eliminated, including the infant emperor and grandson of Kiyomori. Yoritomo had very clearly learned the lesson of allowing a young potential future rival to live. Minamoto no Yoritomo emerged as Japan's supreme military leader, and the half measure employed by Kiyomori was now paying dividends for the Minamoto clan rather than the Taira. Instead of seizing the throne for himself, he established a new seat of power in the east, at Kamakura, heralding the dawn of formalized samurai-led government. Whereas Kiyomori had been content exercising power informally, Yoritomo built the institutions that would legitimize the ascent of the samurai class. In 1292, Yoritomo obtained the imperial commission as the shogun, or military governor, formally legitimizing his rule. He founded the Kamakura Bakufu, a shogun-led military government based in his stronghold of Kamakura. This new regime didn't abolish the imperial court in Kyoto. The emperor remained on his throne as a revered figurehead, while the shogun now pulled the political strings. Real power had completely shifted into the hands of the samurai, but they continued to rule in the emperor's name to preserve an appearance of continuity. Under the Kamakura government, Yoritomo appointed trusted samurai to positions of power throughout the provinces. These officials were empowered to collect taxes, administer justice, and enforce order, functions once managed by imperial governors. In this way, the samurai class took charge of day-to-day governance across Japan, while the Kyoto court's direct influence in local affairs dwindled to almost nothing. Despite this, imperial provinces continued to exist, at least on paper, but they were, in essence, just titles given out by the imperial court to maintain the appearance that they were in control. The rise of a warrior government also reshaped samurai ideals. As de facto rulers, samurai leaders developed their own codes and norms. Initially, the Kamakura shogunate had no legal basis to conduct their own trials, since all legal authority lay with the emperor's administration. During this period, the military simply conducted trials without any legal basis for doing so, leading to significant displeasure over arbitrary justice. In 1232, Yoritomo's successors issued the Joi Code, a legal framework for samurai society that emphasized proper procedure, feudal loyalty, and justice among warriors. Honor and loyalty became cornerstone virtues. A samurai's reputation now hinged on service to his lord and on steadfastness in battle. The samurai increasingly viewed themselves as the guardians of the nation, a privileged class with a duty to maintain order and protect the land. The Kamakura period also tested the samurai's commitments, both domestically and against foreign threats. The most significant trials came with the Mongol invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281. The warriors of Kamakura, fighting in the name of the shogun and emperor, repelled the invading Mongol forces, aided by typhoons that struck the enemy fleets. Though the nation was saved, these exhausting campaigns strained the shogun's treasury. Because no new lands were won, many samurai received no rewards, breeding discontent in some quarters. Nonetheless, the successful defense against a formidable foreign power reinforced the samurai's self-image as the protectors of Japan. The 14th century brought new upheaval that transformed the samurai's role once again. The Kamakura shoguns themselves had long fallen under the influence of the Hojo clan, which left Japan in a very odd legal situation. Formally, the country was governed by the emperor, who had delegated authority to the Minamoto clan in their roles as military governors. But in actuality, real power lay with the shadowy Hojo clan, who governed through the Minamoto, who were in turn governing through the emperor. In 1333, Emperor Go-Daigo rallied disaffected warriors and overthrew the Kamakura shogunate, temporarily restoring direct imperial rule. This brief period, known as the Kenmu Restoration, saw the court attempt to govern without a shogun. However, Go-Daigo's policies alienated many samurai who felt their interests were ignored. Just 2 years later, one of Go-Daigo's chief allies, Ashikaga Tokoji, turned against him. Tokoji seized Kyoto in 1336 and installed a rival emperor while Go-Daigo fled south. Tokoji then declared himself shogun, establishing the Ashikaga shogunate in the imperial capital, ushering in the Muromachi period. During this period, the country was plunged into division. A northern court, backed by the Ashikaga shoguns, and a southern court, loyal to Go-Daigo's line, each claimed legitimacy. Samurai lords took sides, but many shifted allegiance opportunistically to advance their own position. For over 50 years, the land was torn between these two courts. The schism ended in 1392, when the southern court finally capitulated, reuniting the monarchy. Notably, almost all of the movers and shakers of this era were from the samurai class, indicating that they had truly achieved supremacy in affairs of the state. During the Muromachi period, from 1336 to 1573, real power became highly decentralized. Regional samurai lords, called daimyo, operated with considerable autonomy, ruling their domains as semi-independent fiefs while only loosely obeying the shogun. Some shoguns, notably Ashikaga Yoshimitsu in the late 14th century, managed to assert influence and presided over a cultural golden age, blending warrior and aristocratic traditions. Tea ceremonies, no drama, and ink painting flourished under samurai patronage, indicating how much the once rough-edged warriors had absorbed high culture. But such periods of stability were brief. In 1467, the fragile order shattered. A succession dispute between powerful clans erupted into the Onin War, running from 1467 to 1477, which engulfed Kyoto in violence and destruction. This conflict marked the complete collapse of Ashikaga authority. In its wake, Japan entered the Sengoku, or Warring States era, which would become one of the most famous periods of Japanese history. This is the period that would give us legendary names such as Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Tokugawa Ieyasu, and more. Feudal unity gave way to fragmentation, as dozens of daimyo warlords fought incessantly for land and supremacy. In this brutal environment, the samurai's role shifted to perpetual warfare. The ideals of loyalty and honor remained in rhetoric, but pragmatism often ruled the day, with alliances being made and broken as necessary. By the mid-16th century, the samurai class had been both diversifying and consolidating under the strongest warlords, setting the stage for a new unification to come. Modern historians have added nuance to the traditional narrative of the samurai's rise. The popular image of a decadent court toppled by virtuous samurai oversimplifies a complex transition. In reality, the warrior's ascent to power was gradual and frequently cooperative with the existing aristocracy. Many early samurai, including Yoritomo and his peers, sought validation from the imperial court, even as they gained autonomy. Notably, the Bushido Code, often thought of as an ancient, unchanging samurai creed, wasn't formally codified in medieval times. The legend of Bushido as a rigid code of honor obeyed by all samurai began to grow in the centuries of peace in the Edo period. These samurai, who had since become aristocratic administrators in their own right, began to idealize the conduct of their great ancestors. Medieval samurai, though valuing loyalty and honor, were pragmatic about survival and power. Rather than viewing the samurai as a monolithic band of noble swordsmen, modern scholarship portrays them as a diverse group of warriors navigating the political realities of their era. This perspective doesn't diminish their achievements, but it places their legendary conduct in a realistic context. The story of the founding of the samurai is still actively being researched and written by scholars to this day. Their rise from provincial enforcers to the ruling class illustrates how power in Japan shifted from a Chinese style to a feudal style of rule through iron and might. It was a response to necessity, the court needed protection, and an outcome of opportunity seized by those skilled in war. Over time, the samurai built new institutions and philosophies to legitimize and guide their rule. This is a testament to how history sometimes unfolds, not in sudden leaps, but in gradual turns. One day, after centuries of gradual change, the ones who once served have become the ones who rule, and a new chapter of history begins. The samurai, who started out as the rough provincial warriors for the Kyoto aristocrats, would, centuries later, be wearing fine silks, conducting tea ceremonies and composing Chinese poetry. While historians are still working out the full details of their rise, at present what we can say is ultimately the result was the same as it ever was. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to click that like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, don't forget to check out my other channels, my podcast, and my merch store by clicking the links in the description. For over a century, treasure hunters and historians alike have been captivated by the tale of Admiral Alexander Kolchak's lost gold. In the chaos following the Russian Revolution, a vast fortune in gold bullion, once the pride of the Tsar's treasury, seemingly vanished amid the chaos. Admiral Alexander Vasilyevich Kolchak was a prominent leader of the White Movement, the anti-Bolshevik forces, during the chaos following the Russian Revolution. Before the revolution, Kolchak was a celebrated naval officer in the Imperial Russian Navy. He served with distinction in the Russo-Japanese War and the Great War, and also earned a reputation as an Arctic explorer. After the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, Russia plunged into civil war, pitting the Communist Red Army against various anti-Bolshevik White Armies. In this upheaval, Kolchak emerged as a key figure in Siberia, backed by Britain, France, the United States, and Japan, who hoped he could topple the Red Menace. By late 1918, Kolchak had taken control of a provisional anti-Bolshevik government in Omsk, Siberia, proclaiming himself the supreme ruler of Russia. His rule was authoritarian and military-backed, seen by supporters as a last hope for the old order, and by his enemies as a reactionary strongman. This context, with foreign intervention and shifting front lines across the vast Eurasian steppe, set the stage for Kolchak's dramatic rise and fall, as well as the story of the gold. Before the revolution, Imperial Russia held one of the largest gold reserves in the world. These reserves, comprising the wealth of the Tsars and state, were immense. Over 1 billion gold rubles by 1917, an amount then unrivaled globally. During the Great War, as German armies threatened Petrograd, the once and future St. Petersburg, the imperial government transferred much of the gold eastward for safekeeping. By 1918, a huge cache of gold bullion and coins had been stored in the city of Kazan on the Volga River. In August 1918, anti-Bolshevik forces, including units of the Czech Legion and White Russian troops, captured Kazan and seized the gold. This treasure, comprising not only Russian gold coins, but also foreign coins and gold bars, was estimated at about 645 million gold rubles in value. To put this in physical terms, this was 490 tons of gold, an amount that would be valued today at over $50 billion. By November 1918, Admiral Kolchak had taken power in Omsk, and the precious hoard was delivered into his custody. The transfer of such wealth was a boon to Kolchak's regime. It provided the funds he desperately needed to purchase supplies from abroad. An audit in mid-1919 confirmed Kolchak's government held approximately 650 million rubles in gold. This was essentially the core of the former Tsarist bullion reserve, though this had been bolstered with further seizures of wealth along the way. Controlling this gold also gave Kolchak's Siberian administration significant clout among Russia's allies. The admiral's possession of the imperial gold was a cornerstone of his authority and symbolically represented the gilded nest egg of continuity with the old Russian state. But this giant golden nest egg would, naturally, attract significant negative attention as well. By late 1919, the fortunes of the Russian Civil War turned decisively against the Whites. Kolchak's armies, battered by the Red Army's offensives, were in disarray and retreating eastward through Siberia. Omsk, Kolchak's capital, fell to the Bolsheviks in November 1919, forcing him to flee east along the Trans-Siberian Railway, with the bulk of the gold reserve loaded on armored trains. The train's journey was slow and perilous, complicated by harsh winter and the volatile political situation. The Czechoslovak Legion, a force of Czech and Slovak soldiers who had been fighting in Russia and controlled segments of the railway, played a pivotal role. The Czechoslovaks had earlier supported the Whites, but by late 1919 their primary goal was to secure passage home. As Kolchak's gold train moved toward Irkutsk in Siberia, the Czechoslovak Legion effectively held the key to the railway, and thus to Kolchak's fate. In December 1919, Kolchak's train was halted at Nizhnudinsk, not far from Irkutsk. At this time, Irkutsk had fallen under the control of a local anti-Kolchak Socialist Revolutionary Committee, which unsurprisingly was opposed to Kolchak. Under pressure and isolated, Admiral Kolchak agreed to relinquish power. He named White General Anton Denikin as his successor and attempted to place his remaining troops under Grigory Semenov's command. The latter man, the powerful leader of the Transbaikal Cossack host, would play a significant role in the legend surrounding this gold. Crucially, Kolchak placed himself under the protection of the French and British military missions and trusted the Czechoslovak Legion to guarantee his safe passage. It turned out that this trust was misplaced, and these Czechs and Slovaks, on the other side of Eurasia, had no real goal except to return home to their families. On January 14, 1920, the Czechoslovak Legion, eager to broker a deal for their own exit, handed Kolchak over to the local authorities in Irkutsk, despite promises. By early February 1920, Kolchak's tragic fate was sealed. He was cut down by firing squad in Irkutsk on February 7, 1920. Meanwhile, the victorious Bolsheviks obtained a huge prize. The Czechoslovak command, in exchange for their freedom to leave Siberia, turned over vast sums of gold and currency to the Reds. It's been estimated to be about 400 million rubles worth of gold, which accounted for a large chunk of the imperial reserve that Kolchak still carried. The Soviet authorities rejoiced at this windfall, which would help fund the fledgling Soviet state's post-war recovery. However, a significant portion of the gold was missing. Roughly 250 million rubles worth couldn't be accounted for in the transfer. The disappearance of this remaining treasure is what gave birth to the enduring mystery of Kolchak's gold. The question of what became of the missing 250 million rubles in gold has fascinated researchers and spawned countless theories. Some explanations are well documented by historians, while others are more speculative. According to the mainstream narrative, it's likely that no great treasure actually lies hidden. Much of the quote-unquote missing gold was expended, embezzled, or otherwise dispersed during the conflict. For instance, Admiral Kolchak had used substantial funds for military procurement and payroll while in power. Another large portion was sent abroad. Kolchak's government placed about 150 million rubles worth of gold in foreign banks as collateral for loans. Those funds were largely consumed repaying Western creditors and financing the anti-Bolshevik cause abroad. In addition, at least one white warlord simply openly stole part of the hoard and used it for their own purposes. Grigory Semenov, the Transbaikal Cossack commander in Siberia, intercepted and seized a train carrying approximately 40 million rubles in gold in September 1919. Semenov used that gold to fund his own forces against the Bolsheviks, and none of it was recovered. Other portions he simply kept for himself and distributed to his men in exchange for loyalty, which seems on point for a modern-day steppe warlord. When all these expenditures and thefts are tallied, they account for nearly the entire missing amount. Despite these grounded accounts of what happened, other theories continue to persist. One long-standing rumor accuses the Czechoslovak Legion of making off with a share of the gold during their trek home. Kolchak's former finance minister Vladimir Novitsky claimed the Czechs stole tens of millions of rubles of the reserve. Supposedly, this was later used to found a bank in Czechoslovakia with the illicit proceeds. Modern historians have found no solid evidence linking any Czech bank to Kolchak's bullion, casting doubt on this tale. Another famous legend holds that a portion of the gold was lost in the depths of Lake Baikal. According to this story, one of the gold trains derailed along the shore of this lake during the chaos, and several train carriages full of gold plunged into the lake's abyss. This incredibly deep lake, which despite its relatively small surface area contains 20% of the world's unfrozen fresh water, may hold billions in gold. In recent decades, Russian expeditions with mini-submarines have probed Lake Baikal's depths. They've indeed discovered wreckage of train cars and even boxes of ammunition on the lakebed, which is physical evidence that a train did crash there during the time period. In 2010, explorers found fragments of railway carriages and reported shiny metal objects that resembled gold bullion near one crash site. These findings fueled excitement, but no confirmed gold has ever been recovered from Baikal, and skeptics point out that any substantial treasure in the lake remains unproven. That said, some have speculated that it may have worked its way into the pockets of politically powerful people in Russia. Yet another theory conjectures that the missing gold reached the Pacific port of Vladivostok and then was lost at sea. Some speculate the gold was loaded onto a ship or barge that sank in Vladivostok's Golden Horn Bay before it could depart Russia. Geomagnetic surveys in 2017 did detect metal objects resembling rail containers in the bay, stirring talk of Kolchak's gold, though again nothing conclusive was found. At present, the true nature of the whereabouts of Kolchak's gold remains officially unknown, and the speculation surrounding the wealth will continue to fascinate for generations to come. In 1957, two amateur archaeologists digging in Brooklyn, Maine, uncovered a small silver coin caked in mud. The finders, Guy Melgren and Ed Rung, had no idea this little coin would spark decades of debate. They initially assumed it was a very old English penny, so it attracted little attention at first. The true significance of the discovery only became clear years later. The coin, now dubbed the Maine penny, was eventually identified as an authentic Viking Age artifact. In 1978, a photo of the coin in a local archaeological bulletin caught the attention of a London coin dealer who realized it was Norse, not English. Experts determined it to be an 11th century Norwegian silver penny from the reign of King Olaf III of Norway, who ruled from 1065 to 1093. News outlets worldwide picked up the story, and the Maine penny leapt from obscurity to fame as a tantalizing clue of possible further Viking presence in North America. Enthusiasts were quick to link the Maine penny to the voyages of Norse explorers. In 1960, archaeologists confirmed a Viking settlement in Newfoundland, a large island off the east coast of Canada. This was definitive proof that around 1000 AD, Norse explorers had reached North America and established a very modest outpost. Strong evidence suggests those Norse may have traveled as far south as modern New Brunswick in Canada, though some speculate there were much more extensive travels. Maine's coast is only about 100 nautical miles from New Brunswick, so reaching Maine wouldn't be a huge leap for sailors familiar with Atlantic coasts. Thus, finding an 11th century Norse coin in Maine seemed like thrilling evidence that Vikings might have stepped ashore in what's now the United States. At face value, the Maine penny promised to rewrite a chapter of history. If it were truly left behind by a Norse visitor, it would represent the first known confirmed European artifact from pre-Columbian times ever found in the United States. But many scholars urged caution at the time. The coin was unearthed by amateurs without proper records, and among some 30,000 artifacts recovered at the dig site, it was the only European object found. If Norsemen had been present, it's puzzling that no other trace of them turned up. This lone Norse coin amid a trove of Native American material made some experts suspect it was an anomaly rather than proof of a Viking landing. Many archaeologists today believe the Maine penny arrived in Maine through indigenous trade networks, not by a Viking landing. Native peoples of the North Atlantic region traded widely, so a Norse coin obtained in Newfoundland or Greenland could have been passed gradually from community to community. Archaeologists have dated the occupation layer of the site where the penny was found to roughly 1200 AD. This was a period well after the initial Vinland voyages, but within the era when Norse colonists still lived in Greenland. The dig site itself appears to have been a hub for far-reaching trade, according to archaeologists. For example, a tool from Arctic Canada was found there, indicating extreme long-distance exchanges. All this supports the idea that the coin is genuine and old, yet was brought to Maine by native traders. In this scenario, the artifact reflects Norse contact with North America, but not necessarily that Vikings personally visited Maine. Another possibility is fraud. History has seen several fake quote-unquote Norse finds in America, indicating the general fascination with the idea of Norsemen traveling to the region. Skeptics note that genuine Viking coins were available on the collector's market in the 1950s, and Mellgren was a coin enthusiast with potential access to such artifacts. Further, the finding came during a period of Viking sensationalism and hoaxes, which makes the timing of the find seem suspicious to some observers. All that said, there's absolutely nothing beyond very weak circumstantial evidence that the discovery was faked, but the circumstances leave room for potential doubt. Decades later, the Maine penny remains an intriguing, unsolved historical mystery. On one hand, it's undeniably an authentic Norse coin that somehow ended up in a pre-Columbian context on the coast of Maine. On the other hand, according to the academic consensus, a single stray coin in isolation isn't conclusive proof of a voyage.